Hello, and welcome to Unsung Heroes podcast. I am so excited today. I have an incredible guest who has been a friend for many years. She just has been a life to me, an inspiration, and I think you will feel the same. Her name is Gina Mazza. Let me tell you about Gina before we get started. Gina Mazza is known as a word provocateur and creative alchemist. She has been in love with language since she learned to speak it. Gina is the author of 3 books in personal growth category, including Everything Matters, Nothing Matters, which was positively reviewed in Publishers Weekly. And that one is absolutely my favorite. As a professional editor, ghostwriter, and publishing consultant, she has helped hundreds of individuals to refine their writing projects and send them off into the world. You can reach Gina at checkoutginamazza, Mazza.com. Gina is also an award-winning journalist whose focus areas include holistic wellness, integrative medicine, human potential, and life living inspired by higher purpose and deep meaning. Gina's career also includes a solid background in PR and advertising, business marketing, media writing, corporate branding, and transmedia communications. Gina is also a partner with Creative One Marketing. Check out creativeonemarketing.com for more information and for her services. On a personal note, and we love those, one of Gina's core passions is dissecting life's mysteries to expose its grandeur. She sees creativity and higher consciousness as inextricably linked and views her work not just as a vacation and path of service, but as a sacred merging with the creative. So powerful. Gina, welcome to Unsung Heroes podcast.
Hi, Christy. It's so good to be here with you.
I appreciate your time. So Gina, what a resume and great things you have done. Can you talk to us about what led you into such deep spiritual work?
Well, I think it started when I was a child. I was raised in a Catholic environment, went to Catholic grade school, and I just didn't fit into a lot of what was being taught there. I had questions outside of what was being taught there and was kind of branded a troublemaker because of that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Though I was an A student, I was just always very inquisitive. So what I found myself doing is just lying in bed at night and talking to God. And I didn't know what that was, but I was absolutely having a dialogue. And I was asking big questions about the meaning of life and death and what am I doing here and those life questions. Not that it was I wasn't being heavy about it as a child. I was just being inquisitive. Like I just wanted to know what I didn't know about life. So that to me was more powerful and led me into a spiritual experience in my life, even more so than being in a religious environment, like going to Catholic school.
Yes. Okay. During that time, what types of emotions were you experiencing?
I was the fourth child in the family, the only girl. And so my 3 older brothers were off doing their thing and there was a little bit of a double standard, in those days. My parents were older. They were in their 40s when they had me. So they were off doing their thing and I was kind of left to my own devices. And I didn't feel lonely in that. I actually have come to appreciate my own company. I actually like having space and time to contemplate things.
Yes.
And again, I think that started as a child when I was pretty much told, just like stay in the house, you're the girl, you can't go out. My parents didn't even really want me talking on the phone to my friends.
Yes.
So I read a lot. And I think that led to me becoming a writer, obviously. The best writers that I know are well read. So the emotion was just, I don't know, a sense of peace, of just being able to do my own thing and introspect. And then later on, of course, that changed when I became a teenager and had my girlfriends and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think at a very early age, you learned to really create peace through spiritual work and through God. And that really anchors people, right? So talk to me about how God has anchored you through your life at some difficult times.
Well, I would say that I started very ambitiously on a consciousness path around the time that my children were born. So I was around the age of 30 when that happened. Prior to that, I would say, caught up with the rat race as many other people were. I had graduated from college. I put myself through college, so that was a lot of work, working to lead up to going to college and then being in college. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. and took a pretty high-powered job in the District of Columbia, and was caught up in that. And I was happily caught up in that. It was, part of my learning, part of my growth as an adult. As they say now, I was adulting and really learning how to be on my own and self-reliant in that way.
Yes.
So when I got married, when I was probably 27, 28 years old when I got married, and had my children a few years later. And I guess what I could say to describe that is that it was almost like a rebirth for me as well when I had my children.
Yes.
And it caused me to shift in the sense that I wanted to understand that if I was going to do something that was going to take me away from raising these two babies, it had to be really important. It had to be something way beyond just earning an income for the family, although there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But something a lot more meaningful and a lot more purposeful for me. Yeah. And so that led me back to my core essence, which is as a creative soul.
Yes.
And it also brought in that element of consciousness and spirituality because, again, going back, hearkening back to when I was a kid in bed talking to God, I always felt like creativity and consciousness were these two things that were interrelated.
Yes.
And they emanate from the same source.
Yes.
So to me, it made sense that once I started down this path of rediscovering my creative essence, that I also was able to tap into the essence of source.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you begin to identify that essence of you?
I actually worked with a coach at that time, a business coach in Pittsburgh. And he helped me really delineate out what I was yearning for that I didn't know I was yearning for. Yes. I didn't know at that time that I had lost these essential pieces of myself.
Okay.
And many people don't know. When they get to that stage in their life where they're, potentially partnered with someone and have a family and have a house and a car and job, you're doing what you need to do to take care of your family and your loved ones. But yeah, and I think men as well really struggle with this because, they take on that burden, that responsibility of taking care of their families.
Right.
And so I worked with this coach, and he helped me really kind of whittle down to what it was that I was feeling an uncomfortability around,
yes.
A yearning for, and it was really just a yearning to be more of myself. And at that time, I had really gotten away from, especially in my career, I was working in just full-blown hardcore marketing, PR, advertising, and that played into it as well, Christy, because I was becoming really disenchanted with the way marketing is done. And so I found myself having a repulsion to it almost, and, helping people with their marketing and their advertising and so forth. But at the same time, not wanting to play that game of fear-based, you need this or you need to buy this,
sure,
because there's some sense of lack. I wasn't really, I didn't align with that.
Yes, yeah.
And so he helped me do all of that, and he got me back to writing, journal writing, which I think is an extremely valuable tool for anyone to help dissect what it is that's going on internally, is to just sit down and write it on the page. I think there's something about putting your hand, a pen to paper,
yes,
and doing that clears your mind, helps you really be able to mirror back to yourself what it is that you're saying to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Very
that's how I started.
great, great. And I think it's so important to be able to learn how to quietly listen to that alignment and what feels healthy for you. And so many times, like you said, media and people around you can crowd that where you don't hear it, you know? And so learning how to do that has been essential in you working through and achieving, right? And journaling is one of the most successful ways to care for thyself.
Yes.
And I agree, typing is not the same as pen and paper. You know, I often tell my clients, I want you to go to the store and buy a really, really cool journal, whether it's great leather or it's pretty with flowers, whatever you need it to be, make it sacred, because this is a place that you are going to just flourish. So absolutely.
Right. And you have nothing to lose. You go to the dollar store and buy $1
Right.
journal and a pen that you like that feels good in your hand and just your time to do it. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain by taking that process seriously.
Yes, yes. So as you were working with a coach, what were the pieces of you that you were able to identify that you had lost?
Well, I could sum them up in 2 words, a writer and a dancer. So when I was young, I did a lot of those 2 things. I was on a track to become a professional dancer, actually, but my parents were not in favor of that. And again, you know, very loving but very protective Italian parents, and was getting ready to audition for the Rockettes in New York, and they absolutely forbid me to do that. And so I listened to them. I said, okay, I'm not going to do it.
Wow.
And so I took a different path, going, like I said, you know, going to college. I actually taught dance that was one of the ways that I earned the money to go to college. And then after I got married and was working in a career that was, you know, 60, 70, 80 hours a week,
Wow.
that all fell by the wayside. And I was writing, but I was writing for everyone else. And I was writing marketing copy and things, again, like I said a minute ago, that I didn't necessarily agree with. I wasn't feeling good. I wasn't feeling integrous about writing stuff that I knew wasn't really authentic, maybe.
Yes.
So even though I was writing, I had gotten away from the true flavor and feel and joy of writing as I knew it to be.
Yes.
So he found a way to help me get back to articulating these 2 core expressions in my life. And lo and behold, I absolutely at that time went back to dance training and was dancing twice a week, training and also performing. And I was in my 40s at that point. I was still on point, you know, but it was something that I felt like I had to get it out of my system. I had to really use it as a form of expression for myself. And then writing, of course, I got back to writing the things that I wanted to write about. And right after I started doing that, I very quickly, as synchronicity would have it, I very quickly happened upon someone who had an extremely interesting story to tell, but she wasn't a writer. And so we created a co-authorship, and within a couple of years, that book was published. So I didn't actually initially set out to be a published author. It just sort of happened in that way, and it set me on that course as well.
Yes, yes, that is awesome. So as I see you, I've often thought of you as one of the most strongest independent women that I know. And I love that about you. So through those years of coming to that place of knowledge, was there a time where you did struggle at all with feeling overly stressed, overwhelmed, or with anxiety or depression at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say on the regular, but it really did. You know, life ebbs and flows. There's good days, bad days, things happen. No one gets out unscathed, right?
Yeah.
Life happens to all of us. So, yeah, so I would say that the years that led up to what I would say were my years of struggle were years of when the second half of my marriage, I was married for 20 years. So the first half was great. And the second half, I saw some things happening with my spouse. And I was, as I had mentioned, I started on this spiritual path. And so I was growing and evolving and had this impetus to want to do that. And he was on a different, I wouldn't say that he went on to a different path. He sort of stayed on the path that he was on. Yeah. He's a professional, successful, really caring about status and income and those kinds of things, which, again, nothing wrong with that. But our paths started to diverge in that way. And he really did become, I should say, he wasn't at all supportive of any successes that I had. He sort of took them personally and over time became very critical of anything that I was doing that he didn't feel that I should be doing. Yes. That took me away from helping him in any way. I should mention that the first 10 years of our marriage, he and I ran a company together.
Oh, okay.
It was a CPA marketing consulting firm. And so the first half of the marriage I was spent helping him become successful in that and building my marketing practice as well, but kind of following his dream.
Right.
Which he was able to manifest. And then after we had the children, it was like, okay, it's time for my dream. And he was kind of like, no, I won't have any of that. And so that's what started that path of criticism on his part. So I would say over those 6, 7, 8 years, I started to, even though I'm a very strong person, when you're living with someone that you love and you're hearing 24/7, like, no, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. There was a lot of shoulds and woulds and that kind of language said to me, you start to assimilate that a little bit. You start to feel like, well, maybe this person's right. Maybe I am on the wrong path, or maybe I am, wasting my talent, he would tell me, things like that. So yeah, I did struggle with, okay, this person knows me. Maybe they're right. Maybe they know me better than I know myself. But I was, at the same time, opening up to my inner wisdom, my presence, and becoming more balanced, more grounded in myself and understanding myself more. And so that voice within myself became the dominant voice over the voices that were outside of me saying, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that, or who do you think you are, or, all of those things that people say to try to keep someone in their place.
Yes.
And that all came to a head. I say the year 2007 was my year from hell, because it was on the verge of my third book being published. Everything Matters, Nothing Matters was published in 2008. And so 4 months before it was launched by my publisher, I had known for a while, but I had actually discovered that my spouse was involved with someone else. And so that all kind of came to a head. And so things happening with him, and also things happening within my extended family were happening all at the same time. So it was like this double whammy. And I'll just sum it up to say that the energy of it, the emotion of it was betrayal, and deception. Okay. Those two things. And I think that's my core emotional wound in this life, is the wounding of betrayal. And so, yeah, it was a really, really interesting time. And what I could say to your listeners is just that I had to start really walking the talk of what I had been writing about. That's really where the rubber meets the road. You can talk, you can pontificate all you want about spiritual awakenings and these kinds of things, but the practical essence of it, how it boils down in your daily life, is really where the work begins. That's really the beginning of the work. And so it was actually a supreme opportunity for me to get out there on book tour and start actually living the experience of what I had written about. So the timing was not lost on me. It was very divine in terms of the timing, but it wasn't easy, because I was dealing with being on book tour and having this commitment to my publisher and being in front of large crowds and book expo and all of these places and showing up and wanting to be real.
Yes.
And at the same time, had this worry in the back of my head of what's going on at home, or my spouse had, threatened to kidnap my kids, and he certainly did financial maneuvering with things, all of that was happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So it was just the thing that happened in my life. Everybody has their thing to deal with, and that's just how it showed up for me.
Yeah.
In the end, it's really a blessing, because it really did propel me out of a relationship that wasn't healthy.
Yes.
And wasn't healthy for my kids at the time either, for them to see that. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that we could spend an entire podcast on how marriages begin to fall apart when a woman grows and a man remains on the same path. I counsel on a regular basis women who are heartbroken that their spouse isn't growing alongside them, and now they have to make this decision about the marriage, and how men feel oftentimes when women are strong, independent, and beginning to make those changes.
Yeah, and I'm sure other women on your podcast and women who are listening also struggle with, I am a strong person, and I thank you for seeing that in me. But it's not always pleasant as well, because especially it seems like it's more with men than with other women. I have a lot of women friends who are really strong soul sisters, really supportive of me. And we can talk about that all day too, because that's really an important aspect of life, and of being open to experiencing yourself as a divine feminine power. Yes. But I notice with men that they're attracted to a strong woman, but then they're repelled by them. Yes. It's like they are attracted to it. They want you to be independent, but then at the same time, they want to kind of shut that down in you. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that you really learn until you're actually with the person. And yeah, so it's not easy. I think that relationship long-term, it takes a lot of work. And my favorite of all time quote about it is from the poet David White. He said that he thinks that marriage, do you love David White? Okay.
Obsessed with David White.
Obsessed, yes. Yes, I've actually hung out with him a couple times. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. He says that a marriage should be a contest in generosity.
Yes.
A contest in generosity. But you need two people who are willing to be generous. If one's generous and the other isn't, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, I've seen in my past marriage, very similar experience, as well as dating then after I got divorced, just being able to find a man that was equally yoked, that was willing to accept me for who I am in terms of independent, strong, entrepreneurial mind, creative type, and I think that for me, have been very blessed with my husband and the remarriage, having that second chance, because he allows me to have that and be just who I am without feeling threatened. And I think that's rare, Gina. I think that is so rare.
Yeah, I wonder why it is. What's happening here in our society that we're perpetuating this? And again, I'm feeling for the male population as well, because they come into this with their own wounding about their upbringing, the way they were brought up, and the things they were told to be and not be. And so I think it goes back to that. And again, that's a whole other podcast of how do we raise our children?
Yes.
To evolve beyond the issues that arise for us now because of the way they're raised.
Yes, absolutely. So as you're evolving, and I'll share with you, and you didn't know this, but your book, Everything Matters, Nothing Matters, was actually my catalyst of rebirth. And that's where I really started to just heal and move through and make some major life decisions. because of that beautiful writing. So amidst what you were experiencing, you're publishing this third book. How did you come to this place of being able to do that?
Of publishing the book?
Yes, among all of this emotion you're experiencing.
Right. Well, first, thanks for sharing what you just shared, because that is the absolute best thing that any author can ever hear, is that their writing affected someone else in such a positive and profound way.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to hear that. The book was really not something, again, that I intended to write. It was sort of unintentional in the sense that I was going through this process of opening spiritually and was working with a couple of spiritual mentors at that time. And I did go through this period of time when I would say, I like to say the top of my head blew open, and I just, like, my intuition, my clairvoyance, clairaudience, all of those things just really started sharpening and coming into full view for me. And I really just wanted to document, because I am a writer, I wanted to document what was happening to me and just kind of look at it and see, well, what is this? And so I just started keeping really copious notes on Word files about the different things that I was experiencing. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't have any intention of doing anything with those, sharing them with anyone, actually, because they were very personal. But then I had a situation where I was on a road trip, and it was a road trip from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. And I had made that trip many, many times because I had lived down there. And I was told to get into the car. You know, my higher self was like, get into the car and don't turn on the radio, bring your digital voice recorder. And so I did, and I didn't know what that meant or why. But when I get these higher messages from Spirit, I listen. And I feel that they actually come from the Holy Spirit. So I'm tapped into that, and I just pay attention and I do what I'm told. Mm-hmm. So I turned on my digital voice recorder and I started just talking into it. And I know that trip is 4.5-hour trip. Mm-hmm. And whether listeners believe this or not, it actually happened. I made the trip in 3 hours. So there was like some time warping thing that was happening. Right. And the car was on cruise control. I didn't get pulled over for speeding or anything like that. But I went into some other dimension, and I was talking for the full 3 hours.
Wow.
And I didn't do anything with those transcripts until about a year later. Okay. And I went back and I listened to it, and it was a very smoothed out version of a book outline. And so all I really had to do was follow my notes to myself and then start plugging in these notes from these stories that had happened to me during those years of my evolution. And it was just like a jigsaw puzzle, like putting the pieces together. And my thought was, okay, I want this to be helpful for other people, because if I can do it, they can do it.
Absolutely.
And then the other really quick synchronicity that happened was I was actually at Book Expo for an entirely different reason, met an editor, asked her if she would review my rough draft of the manuscript. Yes. And, I would pay her to do it. But I told her to not call me for 6 months because I was working on another book project, long story short. She called me 6 months later, and she not only had edited the manuscript, but she had submitted it to a publisher for me. Okay. And that publisher ended up giving me a book contract for it. So I just went with the flow, I just flowed with the go of it. And before I knew it, it was being published. So I didn't really even have a chance to get nervous about it.
Yes.
Which I could have, because a lot of the stories are very intimate and very personal.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. Talk to us about the power of authenticity as you have truly honed that characteristic in your profession.
Yeah, very much so, because I also do work with not just individuals who are wanting to write and publish or express their business or their brand, but also organizations. I talk to companies about what I call essence work, and it's the thing that I help them do before they even talk about what their brand is going to be. Oh. So you can't really have an authentic brand identity until you've really understood the essence, or what I call the entelechy of the culture. The culture meaning the founder and their vision, or the culture meaning the group of people, the group of souls who have come together to create this venture and launch it into the world. So speaking of authenticity, I feel that if you don't do that process first, then any brand or any marketing that you put together is not going to be on the mark. Even if it's like 5% off, it's not going to reach its intended audience, or it'll reach them and it'll deflect. They won't really hear it or resonate with it because it won't ring true to them. Mm-hmm. So authenticity is extremely important, and it's kind of a buzzword that people use now, but I think it is for a reason.
Yes.
And there's we see a lot of contrast in the world right now. We see a lot of things that aren't authentic, and we're starting to speak up about those things. We're starting to get incensed to the point where we want to reach back and say, okay, I don't want this. So what is it that I do want? And what we do want is truth.
Yes.
We do want truth. We do want things like, as you see in the news every day, basic human rights, and the ability to have a voice, and not just have a voice, but to be empowered with your voice. So it just boils down to that, in my opinion. And I know that's way off the subject of authenticity, but I feel like it's all tied together, especially with what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the journey to authenticity is terrifying for many people, nor do they know the path. And so it's people like you who help them see that path and how to get to that place.
Right. And I can say too that I understand what you're saying, that a lot of people are terrified of it. I see that in people. And being a writer and an editor, a lot of times people are very open and vulnerable with me because they're sharing their baby, they're sharing their story, and it's very personal to them. So I end up being, not as you are, a trained therapist of any sort, but a counselor of sorts, in helping them navigate the emotionality around the creative process. Yes. And expressing themselves in the world. So yeah, I do think that it's really important to really know how to just be still and turn within. And meditation is a great way to do that. That's one of the things that I always recommend. Good. But the reason that I feel that it's really important is because what I've learned over the years, and I've worked with a lot of people who are in the healing arts and do a lot of integrative medicine and also holistic wellness type work. But the conclusion that I've come to personally is that no one can truly heal another. Only you can heal yourself. Yes. And it's work that no one can do for you.
Absolutely.
So it takes that level of accountability. It takes that level of self-responsibility. And it also takes the desire to do it.
Absolutely.
Which is a whole other subject that I know you deal with a lot too, is, people kind of lose hope, and they don't even care to try to figure out what's going wrong in their life because they are demotivated in some way, or diminished, or depressed in some way.
Right.
And that's a whole other ball game in itself.
Yes.
As you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always think it's interesting, and I'm sure you see this too through your coaching and your work, is that people will say, thank you so much. I'm a different person now. Thank you. But I get uncomfortable, and I can hear it in your words why I bring this up. I get uncomfortable and I look at them and say, hey, I am but a vessel. Like, please, there's no need to elevate me to that place. You did the work. I was just that catalyst for you to do that work, because people don't even realize the ability they have to create this beautiful self.
Right. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't know, and I think a lot of it has to do with, I think the majority of it has to do with things outside of yourself.
Absolutely.
It's what people are saying to you. It's their perception of you, or what you should be doing or ought to be doing. And no one really has the right to tell you how you should live your life. As long as you're not hurting anyone, you should be free to do whatever it is that you want to do in life. And without any constraints. Society puts a lot of constraints on us of what a relationship should look like, or what a career should look like, or what being a parent should look like. But to be free to, to kind of, I don't want to say make your own rules, because we do have universal law that we have to follow. We can't just go out there and do whatever we want. But again, as long as you're not harming anyone, to just really step back and think first before you make a decision about something that you're doing. Does it feel right with you? Is it in alignment with your core values? And how does it make you feel? You asked me that question earlier in the podcast. I think that's one of the most important questions that we can ask ourselves when we start to venture into something is how does it make me feel? And just kind of sit with that, and also feel it in your body as well.
Yes. And I think your process of healing truly allowed you to develop the strength in your identity. And many people struggle with, what are my core values? How do I hear my gut instinct? And what you do through writing teaches them how to do that, because through your journey how to do that, right? So when you look at being a creative type, you and I both know there are stigmas around the creative type. People will judge the entrepreneurial type. So how did you battle those stigmas as you were growing and developing?
Well, I think I'm kind of fortunate in the sense that I have a good balance of left brain and right brain. So I'm very inquisitive and analytical and practical, very pragmatic person. Like, for example, in my business, I love to do the accounting. I love to look at my finance, I that kind of thing. It's not like, oh, I'm a creative person, I can't go there.
Right.
I love the numbers aspect of it, and the strategy and all of that. So I think that's come to my aid. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's my astrological chart, the signs I was born under or whatever. But I think it's important to do that. It's important to have, to bring a pragmatism to your artistry.
Yes.
But at the same time, when you're in that aspect of expressing yourself, of being creative, to completely devoid yourself of that other side, if you can, and the only way to really do that is to do it, to just give yourself the time and the spaciousness around just being creative for the sake of being creative. When I was working on my first book projects, I literally had to, because my left brain was making me do this, I had to schedule my writing time in as if I were a client.
Yes, perfect.
And so that gave me the permission that I needed from my left brain to allow my right brain to just have 3, 4, 5 hours on a Friday morning to do whatever was coming to me creatively, and not feel like I was wasting time, or not billing my time or whatever crazy stuff my head would tell me. So.
Yeah, that is great. One of the lessons I teach clients is to leverage our pain. And that is part of the platform of this podcast, is really looking at what pain you experienced in life and how you leverage that to your success. And we've talked about your pain. What would you say is the biggest life lesson you've learned from that?
Wow, so many life lessons. Wow. How much time do we have? I think that the one that has stayed with me over the decades is that it's not what happens to us in life. It's because everything is inherently neutral in terms of a universal perspective, not for us personally, of course.
Right.
But that's the nothing matters part. Everything is ultimately insignificant. Okay, but that's a really hard part to get to. Right. The everything matters part is, just having gratitude for every single thing that comes your way, and not dismissing it as positive or negative, but just, seeing the neutrality of it. That's really hard to do, and it's a lifetime practice for sure. So I'm not at all making light of that. But that is my philosophy that I live by, is that it's not what happens to us in life, it's who we are going through it and who we become as a result of it. And that's the only thing that can change. What we're actually changing is the quality of our life experience. We're not really changing ourselves, because we are who we are, but we're changing the quality of our life experience by the way we respond to something. Yeah. And so that, and also just, as Socrates said, know thyself, that's a really important one as well.
Yes.
To really know your motivations, to know why you're doing things, to be conscious, of why you're choosing what you're choosing. We're putting together a course right now, which I can talk about later if we have time, but that course talks about how every single one of us is a creator. Yes. And quantum physics actually proves that now, that our thoughts matter. They come into form, they bring things into form. And so every minute of every day, whether you believe it or not, there's no belief system required. You're actually creating your reality. Yes. So why not be conscious that you're creating your reality?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's also something, again, it's a lifelong practice. It's not something that you're going to master overnight, but that's the fun of it. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
Absolutely. So can you share with us just a peek into your daily routine of self-care?
Self-care. Yeah, I've gotten better at that lately since I've sold my big house and property and all of that. And my children are both graduated from college and working.
It gets so much easier when they're out of the house, doesn't it?
Oh my, yeah. It's really liberating in a sense of, wow, I didn't realize I had so much time in life. I didn't realize. So I did kind of shift my lifestyle. So now I'm living in Tennessee, and I have right now a space that is much smaller than what I had, and I absolutely love it. And so I have put more of a focus on self-care. And I have to say, it's super important, super important. What I realized in the past few years, and this is something that I think will be of value to your listeners, that, I do what I love. I'm a writer, a journalist, book author. I'm helping people with their esoteric abilities and merging that into their work life. And so I was under this delusion that if you're doing what you love, you can never get burned out by it. And I'm a workaholic by nature. I got that from my dad, who was an entrepreneur. And over time, I started realizing that I wasn't as excited to get up in the morning and sit at my desk and start working. And I couldn't understand why, because I love the projects I'm working on. I love my clients. I love everything I'm doing. And it took me a while, and I should have called you maybe 2 years ago. But it took me a while to understand that I was burned out. And I actually was in meditation one day, and I saw a phrase over my third eye. It said, high functioning creative burnout. Well, that's what you are. And I realized at that point that I really needed to bring more balance back into my life in terms of, okay, yes, I love what I do and I could do it all the time, but that doesn't mean that I should do it all the time, because there's more to life than, and when I say working, for me, working is, I'm traveling to exotic places, I'm meeting with interesting people. So a lot of times it doesn't feel like work, but it still is. You're still on, your brain is still on.
Absolutely.
So yes, this past year I became a lot more cognizant of the fact that I need to self-care. So I allow myself to sleep more than I did. I was only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night.
Wow.
And so now I get a routinely the same, I try to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. I absolutely get up and do my meditation first thing in the morning. Right. And I take time in the morning. I don't rush. Yes. Very much just take my time. I usually schedule my workday the day before. So I'm not getting up and going, oh, God, what do I need to do today and how do I organize it? I pretty much already know what my priorities are. And I use a little bit of business strategy, which I'm sure a lot of people do, my day timer and so forth, where I look at what I need to do, priority A, priority B.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I take breaks during the day. I wasn't doing that. I was working through lunch and I was eating lunch, but I was going from one room to the other, with my smoothie or whatever. Right. Now I actually go out and I take a walk or I work out at the gym and come back.
Right.
And I'm really mindful of my diet. I think food is medicine. And so it's really important what you put into your body. And, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on that one and to many people listening, because that's really pervasive nowadays. People are tending to know that now.
Much better.
So yeah, and I like to experiment with that. I like to experiment with, like right now I'm doing the ketogenic thing. Yes. So it's very interesting. I think the body is an experiment, in a lot of ways of how to maintain optimal health. And so yeah, just moving your body is really important.
Good.
And just taking time to do things like I'll go hiking in the woods, or I'll go down to some other places in town here and just go walk or spend a day in nature. Right. It's all those basic things. It's not rocket science, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to hear, that it's not rocket science.
Yeah. And it's really important, again, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, that you put on your own oxygen mask before you put on someone else's. And that's really, really true. And I did experience that. I was feeling the past year or so before I sold my house and moved here, I was actually feeling like a low grade, I would say, depression. Mm-hmm. Like I just feel unmotivated and I'm not feeling passionate about what I'm doing. And that was really disturbing for me, because I am a really passionate person. And it's like, where'd my mojo go? Where'd it go?
Right.
And I didn't know why I wasn't feeling it.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for sharing your daily routine. So before we wrap up, share with our audience what your services are, the course that you're talking about, and how people can reach you if they want to hire you.
Right. So I have two small companies. One is my writing practice, which you can go to ginamazza.com, GINAMAZZA.com. And you'll see everything on there related to my work as a word provocateur. So yes, I am a journalist. You can read clips of my writing, and I'm published nationally, internationally. I've been doing it for 35 years. There's also information on there about my editing work, my creativity consulting type work, and also my published works are on there. Any book that I published is on there as well. And a couple other tidbits of things that are interesting. I also do ghostwriting. I always mention that because a lot of people tend to not think that I do ghostwriting, but I do. I'm pretty selective about the projects that I do take on with that, because that's a big project in itself. But my help with author support is the whole gamut. It's everything from helping you develop your book idea, developmental editing, proofreading, helping you determine which route is best to go, whether self-publishing or traditional publishing. And if your work is, if you're wanting to go the traditional route, I can help get your work ready for prime time, and I can help you connect with agents and editors and publishing houses. I have many clients that I've helped them find their publishers and publish their work. And if you're wanting to self-publish, if that's the right platform for you, then I can help you do that as well, to get the manuscript ready to be in final form. Yes. And then the other business that I have is I'm a partner with creativeonemarketing.com. It's one spelled out, creativeonemarketing.com. And Creative One is, as I was saying, it's a combination of all of my marketing and PR and media background with my esoteric capabilities. So we actually have a process which we call the meta process, which we actually tune into source and help individuals and organizations refine, define, and really get clear on their reason for being and what their mission is in the world. and how to carry that out in terms of, through every department within the organization, as well as mirroring it out to the world with brand identity. Wow. So we do the full service marketing, but we have a core group of people that help us do that. So we can do branding, web design, content, blogging, all of that stuff, collateral, production, all of that kind of thing.
Yes. Wonderful.
But our sweet spot is really the essence branding piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we've been doing lately is bringing people into that space of what we call the meta space. So we open up a sacred space for the core team in the organization, and we actually bring them into that and have dialogue, a narrative, and they end up really feeling for themselves, experiencing for themselves this connection to source. So it's not us telling them, it's them experiencing it. So the course that we're coming out with now, it's our very first online course, and we're doing it because people are asking for it, which is a really wonderful thing. So it's called The Business of Creation, The Creation of Business. And it's 2 sets of 3 modules. The first one is really talking about the business of creation is about the creative process, the use of the imagination, and then we bring consciousness into it, and we teach a way to tap into consciousness so that it becomes engaging with the universe. You're actually engaging in a dialogue. And then part 2 of the course, the creation of business, takes all of that about imagination, creativity, and consciousness and overlays it into the business realm. So how do you take these tools and utilize them as a litmus test for how to stay true to your organization's culture, how to grow your organization, how to treat your employees. It really gets into an aspect of what we call conscious business, and a term that we're coming up with to explain what that is a holographic work culture. Holographic meaning that every aspect of what you do has to be a mirror of what that core essence or entelechy of the organization is. So it's triple bottom line. It's actually quadruple bottom line. So it's people, planet, profit, and also presence, bringing presence into business. We're going to teach all of that in this course, and it launches September 17th. Okay. Yeah, and the website for that, which will probably be live by the time this airs,
yes,
is the inner, INNER course,
nice.
.net, theinnercourse.net.
Okay.
And we're calling the series that because it's an inner journey.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And it sounds incredibly powerful and truly like globe shaking for these businesses.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. If you're ready to really evolve personally and professionally, this course is definitely for you because it'll rock your world in such a great way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. You're doing wonderful things. Before we wrap up, anything else about your story that you wanted to share or say that's important for our listeners?
Yeah, just keep the faith. Keep the faith within yourself because life is ever changing. The only thing constant in life is change, right? It's all about that. It's knowing that things are always ultimately going to change. And so if you're aware of that and you embrace that, again, not always easy to carry that out in your life, but to just have that in your consciousness that the way things are today aren't the way they're necessarily going to be tomorrow, next year, or 10 years from now. And that's important to know if you're really riding high in your life or if you're really at a low spot. To know that, this too shall pass, I guess. As the Bible says.
Right. Thank you. Well, Gina, thank you so much for your time and being here on Unsung Heroes podcast. I think you've demonstrated clearly that you truly are a hero and give back to save people's lives, both from the inner to the outer. So thank you for being on our show, Gina.
Oh, thank you. It's been great to be here with you, Christy. Love you.
Love you.